In the last video, we created our weather provider, and inside the weather provider, we created a function called getPosition, where we added the getPosition method from the geolocation plugin, and we added it into our app.component.ts file. In this video, we are going to create another method. Now that method, we are going to use the HTTP client so that we can get data from the API, which is the Open Weather Map API. Now, in this video, we are going to see how we can get the current weather data. But before we write the function inside the weather provider class, let's go into our app.component.ts file. Now, inside the app.component.ts file, we need to make some changes. First, these pages, we can leave the name pages, but we need to change this type. We don't want this, so we need to set it to type any, and it's going to be an array. So pages of type any, and we initialize it to an empty array. So now we've initialized these pages right here, so we don't need this. Let's take it out. Inside this array, that is where we are going to add all of the data that we'll get from the API. So any current weather information for any city, we are going to push into this pages array. Now that we've made this change, what we need to do now is let's go to Open Weather Map API. So on the browser right here, you can go to Open Weather Map. So open weathermap.org/API. I believe you have your own API key because credentials, or if you've not signed up, just sign up or you sign in. It's going to take you to the dashboard where you can generate your own API key, or you use the API key that was generated for you. Now, once you're able to do that, what we want to do is first we want to get the current weather data. So to get the current weather data, I'll click right here. Now for the current weather data, we want to make use of the longitude and the latitude. And remember, in the last video, we saw how to get the longitude and the latitude of the device's current location. So now for current weather information, you can get the information by city name. You can get the information by city ID. You can get the information either by geographical coordinates, that is passing in the latitude and the longitude. And you can also use the zip code if you know the zip code. But what we want to use here is we want to use the geographic coordinates of the device's current location. Now to do that, first let's go back to our weather provider. So inside the weather provider, I'm going to create a new function. So I'll call the function current weather. You can give it any name you want. Now inside this current weather, it's going to take in some parameters, and the parameters are the longitude and the latitude. So I'll pass in the longitude. I'll say long of type number. This is how you specify the type in TypeScript. So longitude, this is going to be for the longitude, and it's of type number. Then this one as well, latitude of type number. Now there is something we want to do. Now this current weather is going to return something called an observable. Now an observable basically is just like an element that will give us information. For us to get those information, we just need to subscribe to the information. It's just like listening for the information. Once the information is being passed through a stream, we just subscribe to that particular information. Now to make use of the observable, we need to import it from ROX.js, which is reactive extension JavaScript. Now this is not only for Angular or JavaScript. There are other languages available for ROX, like Java. You can use ROX in Java. You can use it in C# and some other languages. So what we need to do now is we import observable from ROXJX/observable. So with this now, whatever data will be returned from this HTTP client, we are going to subscribe to that data. So we are going to use this HTTP client, and inside this HTTP client, we have the get method, because for us to make use of this API endpoints, we need to get the data using this endpoint. So right here, we already have this observable and we have the HTTP client. Now, this current weather is going to return an observable, and it's going to be of type any. Now, the reason why I'm passing this type here of any is because Open Weather Map usually returns an object, and we are not getting, at this point, we are not fetching specific data from the object. We are returning the complete object. That is why we are passing this type any. If maybe your data to be returned is an array, you can just specify array, any of type array. Or if your data to be returned is of type string, you can just specify string. But in this case, we are just returning an object, so we are just setting the type to any. Now, if I hover on this, it says a function whose declared type is neither void or any must return a value. So for us to make use of this observable, we need to return a value. So right here, we need to do return. Then we say this dot HTTP. Now you can either put dot get right here, or you can move to the next line. So for me, I'll move to the next line. So somewhere here, dot get. Now inside this get, that is where we are going to pass our endpoints. And in the endpoints, we are going to pass this longitude right here, the latitude, and also our API key. So for my API key, right here, I will type API key, or just so of type string. So this is my API key. I can get another API key or generate a new API key. So what you do is create a new variable and set it equal to your API key, and it's going to be a string. Now let's go back to the browser. Right here on Open Weather Map, what we want to do is we are going to copy this api.openweathermap.org, then /data /2.5/weather, then we have the latitude and the longitude. So if I click on this to open it here on the browser, you can see it added a sample API key, and this is the data that is returned, the objects. You can see it's returning an object. Then inside the object, we have arrays, different arrays, and we have also different objects. So what we are going to do is, rather than using samples, so I'll just copy this part here, copy it out. Then inside our get method, I'll pass the double backticks, which is for template strings. So pass double backticks from your key before the number 1 on your keyboard. So we pass the double backticks. Then I type HTTP : then you pass in the code you copied. So copy out this endpoint. Then inside the get method, you pass the double backticks, HTTP : api.openweathermap.org. Now we are going to change this lat. We pass the $, then open and close brackets. Inside we pass the latitude. Then we do the same for the longitude. Right here we pass long. Then the next thing we need to pass, we can pass in the units. Now the unit we want to use is going to be metric. Now it's going to return the temperature in Celsius. If you don't pass any unit, it's going to return the temperature in Kelvin. If you pass in imperial as the unit right here, if you pass in imperial, then it's going to return the temperature in Fahrenheit, but we want the temperature in Celsius. So I'm going to pass in the unit as metric. Then the next thing is to pass the app ID. I'll set it equal to this, which is what we have here. So it's going to be this dot API key. So right here you can see, let me move this one back a bit. So right here you can see now we've added the endpoints. We don't need to add any other function because we are not returning an array and we are not manipulating the data right here. If maybe you want to return, or your observable is returning an array and you want to manipulate the data, you can either use the map method or the filter method, or there are some other methods you can use to manipulate arrays. But in this case, we are returning an object. So we just pass return this.http.get because we want to get data from or using this endpoint. Then in the endpoint, we pass the latitude, the longitude, the unit, and the API key. So right now, with this method, what we need to do is inside our app.component.ts, we are going to call this current weather method. Then we are going to see the data in the console.